I'm delighted that this week I'm joined by Stefan Gullgren, who is Sweden's ambassador to the UK. He's been in post since August 2023. Welcome to the show, Stefan.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we love having ambassadors on, and you are particularly interesting because of the different positions you've held. You are now the UK ambassador, but you've previously served as ambassador to Poland and Ukraine. And of course, that's what we've been discussing today. There's been this big meeting. More money has been announced for Ukraine. President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, has just arrived in St. Petersburg. How confident are you that things will move on Ukraine? We've been talking about tariffs so much, it almost feels like we haven't really talked about Ukraine for the last week or so. But how confident are you?
Well, the situation is very difficult, obviously, and prospects are, to be honest, pretty bleak. But the fact that there is now attempts being made to achieve a ceasefire is, of course, a step in the right direction. Ukraine has said very clearly that it wants a ceasefire. There is strong support from the US and from Europe for a ceasefire. Now we are only waiting for Russia to be on board. And I think one should see the visit by the presidential envoy to St. Petersburg today as one step in trying to ascertain where Russia really stands on the issue of a ceasefire.
And do you think Russia is under any hurry to get on with this? We spoke with somebody who had been close to Bill Clinton's regime, and his view was that he sort of felt that, Russia, and we spoke to other people just saying that Russia will just try and be playing a long game and taking it quite slowly at the moment.
Well, that is one way of reading it, and I think it's correct that people in Moscow, some people at least in Moscow, may feel that time is on their side, but one should understand and remember that the Russian economy is not doing very well. Russia has not made any significant advances on the battlefield for a very long time. We have seen an increase in the number of attacks with drones and missiles. They are trying to push along the front line, but with very little effect. So I think even for Russia, and Russia's resources are not endless, even for Russia, this cannot go on forever. But the problem may be, as you indicate, that Russia does not feel itself to be under any immediate pressure, whereas it's clear that President Trump wants to have a result very quickly. I think the kind of talks that are being held, this meeting today, the other talks that have been held, are serve the purpose to try to ascertain what Russia's position really is. We have also heard, I think, very clear statements from various American representatives that they are not prepared to be drawn into a long process where the focus will be talks about talks. It has to be about substance. And I think my assessment is that we are nearing a point where it will become apparent where and if this is going to go.
Well, let's turn our attention now to the trade situation. Now, your Prime Minister, Sweden, of course, is in the EU, so originally had a 20% tariff. That's now gone down to 10%. We'll see how this pause works out. But your Prime Minister and Finance Minister has said that Sweden's economic growth will be affected by tariffs. They've said that it's a given that the growth outlook must be revised down when the next forecast is presented. How worried are your politicians about the hit to the Swedish economy?
Well, I think our concern is based on the fact that we are a country whose economy is to a very large extent dependent on foreign trade. Exports account for about half of our GDP. The United States is our fifth largest trading partner. The 20 billion pounds of goods trade per year, 26 billion pounds in services. But there are also the wider implications, because if this has a ripple effect through the global trading system, it will, of course, also affect other markets and other economies. And if you are an economy which is to a large extent depending on trading with other countries, you are bound to be affected. So there is a concern both because of the uncertainty created by the various statements on tariffs that are coming out of Washington, but also of the more long-term implications if we are moving from a trading system which has by and large been based on free trade, or at least the ambition to lower trade barriers, to a situation where countries will put up barriers around their economies, and the uncertainty in itself, of course, creates a lot of problems for investors.
And just give our listeners a flavour of the sort of goods and services that Sweden exports to America.
Well, it's of course a very diverse set of goods, but vehicles may not come as a surprise. It's a significant part of our exports. Other industrial products, we are exporting pharmaceuticals, a large number of various products. Some steel, which of course is the focus of separate tariffs together with vehicles. So our bilateral trade is one factor, but as I said, it's not only about our bilateral trade with the US, it's the possible consequences
the
of knock-on effects, the impact on supply chains. The global economy is so integrated and intertwined that it's difficult to just isolate these consequences to one bilateral trade relationship.
And look, we've got this pause now, this 90 days pause. What do you think, what are your sort of hopes, and what do you think that the EU and America will be able to negotiate in that time?
Well, it certainly gives an opportunity for us to understand better to what extent we can alleviate the concerns that may exist. And 3 months, it's better than nothing. I think we are certainly going to give this the best possible chances. The Trade Commissioner from the European Commission is going to Washington next week. He has said that he is going with good intentions. Well, let's see what happens. The uncertainty in itself will probably remain during those 90 days. But it's not a given that it will end badly. We may come out with something much better than we feared a few days or weeks ago. So I think it's a good thing, but the uncertainty will remain, I think, until this settles. We need to find some kind of equilibrium, and we are not there yet.
And if there isn't a satisfactory agreement at the end of these 90 days, does the EU at that point revert to where they were, which was thinking about retaliation and how they can, come together, hit back against America? Maybe there's an argument about big trading blocs coming together, Australia, the EU, others, and forming their own kind of new trading bloc?
I think, first of all, I don't want to speculate about hypotheticals. You may have heard from ambassadors before that they don't like to speculate about hypotheticals. But so let's keep an open mind, and let's stay calm and collected and focused at the task ahead, which is now to try to ascertain to what extent we can reach some progress during those 90 days. Of course, we have prepared a response to the steel and aluminium tariffs that were imposed by the United States, and the Council took a decision on that just a few days ago. The Commission has decided to pause the implementation of those responses during those 90 days to see where we can come, if we can come to an agreement. So our main focus is now to be positive, be active, negotiate with good intentions and in good faith. If necessary, at some point, we also, of course, need to see how we can protect our own consumers.
Of course.
And there is obviously have to be preparations for that eventuality as well. But I would say that at this point of time, that is not our main focus. Our main focus is to try to move forward and resolve whatever needs to be resolved.
And what do you think about the role that Britain has been playing, particularly in terms of Ukraine? And of course, Britain left the EU. We have lots of people in this country who are saying, look, Britain should realign itself with the EU. Keir Starmer has very clearly said he doesn't want to go back into the EU fully in terms of, or the customs union or freedom of movement. But do you think that there is Is there a new partnership, that a closer partnership that Britain can have with greater realignment with the EU? And is now a sensible time to do that, both for the EU and for us in the UK, given the global insecurity?
Well, first of all, in Ukraine, I think the UK has played a vital role from the very beginning. You were among the first to give substantial military support for Ukraine, and especially with certain systems that they needed very badly at the time. And we certainly commend the efforts now by the UK and France with regard to this potential force that would possibly be having some kind of role if we can achieve a ceasefire and there is a political process being established. On the European Union and UK relationship, of course, Sweden has always been very positive to the idea of a as close and well-functioning relationship as possible. And I think the situation now, and I think it's driven mainly frankly, by Russia's war in Ukraine, is that we realize that we have a very strong common interest in the area of security and defense cooperation. So that's, I think, where the more immediate focus will be. If we can establish a closer relationship, well-functioning closer relationship as complement to what NATO is doing for European security, that's a good thing, and it will create a constructive, positive atmosphere within which we can also look at other areas. But it will have to be done both from a British point of view, how far the British government and the British people are prepared to go, because you did vote to leave,
yes,
after all.
We did.
And
we did, Ambassador.
And we fully respect that decision. And I think what we are trying to do is to ascertain to what extent we can, within those parameters, establish as close a relationship as possible.
Are we sometimes just seen as a bit of like a nightmare ex-partner that was like, we want to get out, we're sick of you, and now we're like, hi, can we maybe come back in for a bit?
I don't know. I think my personal view on this is that it's time to move on.
Okay.
I mean, you did vote, but it was 8 years ago.
We need closure. We need to move on.
Yes. So I mean, we need to look forward, not backwards. And the future, it may look bleak now because of what everything is happening, but the fact remains that the United Kingdom is geographically in Europe. The English Channel is quite narrow. You have almost half of your foreign trade with the European Union, and we have the UK is one of our biggest trading partners. We have extremely strong bilateral relations between the UK and various member states, including my country, and we have a common, certainly very common and strong, even increasingly stronger interest in security and defense cooperation. So I think that this will resolve itself over time. We need to be patient, but also resolved to try to get results. And if we maintain that, the sense of purpose, proportion, and urgency, then I think we will actually get somewhere, and I'm very optimistic about that.
Good. Well, that's a kind of a nice, hopeful note. And look, just one question to put to you from one of our listeners, James, Ambassador. He says, please ask the Swedish ambassador why parts of Sweden have recently become so violent with multiple bombings this year already. There have been some bad incidences in Sweden. Just tell our listeners how there has been a lot of concern from citizens in Sweden. What's going on there, and what can be done?
Well, this is a situation that's been building up over a long time, so we are not going to fix it in a short time. It's, to put it very briefly, it's gang-related crime, mainly about the drug market. And those are loosely affiliated groups of criminals who are competing over the drug market. What makes the situation dire is, first of all, that there seems to be quite a lot of weapons in circulation. So I notice in this country there are quite a lot of violence with knives. Yep. In Sweden, unfortunately, they seem to use guns or even hand grenades. Secondly, those groups are increasingly, or have increasingly, I think it's reached its peak, I hope it reached its peak, using very young perpetrators. So there are very young perpetrators who, of course, cannot be brought to justice under the usual legislation for crime and punishment. They are normally young people who would be under the care of the social services. And there is a dilemma when you have a very young perpetrator who can't and shouldn't be prosecuted as an adult committing a very serious crime. How do you deal with that? And how do you stop recruitment into those gangs? We are trying to deal with this in a systematic and concerted way. And I think there is already some progress. But it's going to take time before we can really tackle it, because it has been building up over a many years.
And just leading on from that, an issue which many countries are grappling with, including our own, is managing migration well, managing social cohesion and integration well. I mean, we've got issues in this country. I think lots of countries do. Sweden has also had some issues with that. Do you feel you've made progress on that, or is this still quite a challenging area?
Well, it's both, isn't it? I mean, we have a large part of the Swedish population nowadays has roots in other countries. They've made a tremendous contribution to Swedish society. At the same time, some people find it difficult to integrate into Swedish society. They may come from countries with a very different set of norms. There is a language problem. I think immigrants to this country may have an advantage in the fact that almost everyone in the world speaks English. That is not the case with Swedish. Swedish language is not one of the biggest languages. So unless you learn Swedish, of course, you may find it difficult to find your role in Swedish society. Much could probably have been done better over the last decades in terms of providing the conditions for integration. We are now trying to fix that. We are trying to provide incentives and disincentives to make the integration into Swedish society smoother and quicker. It's a challenge. We are not the only country with this challenge. We have it. We are going to deal with it, and we are going to do it with success. That's the attitude, both from the government and the parties now in the opposition.
Okay. Well, Ambassador, it's been such a pleasure having you in. Thank you so much for coming into the studio for this conversation. Our listeners always really enjoy it. Lisa, one of our listeners, says, I just want to say how much I enjoy these interviews with EU ambassadors. Always interesting and informative, and a reminder of how much we lost when we, not me, voted to leave. More ambassadors, please. And we haven't mentioned ABBA once.
I'm surprised you haven't.
I feel remiss.
Nothing about ABBA, nothing about IKEA.
Oh my!
But perhaps they are so obvious that you don't need to mention them.
Well, I do love them both. I have to say, they're a big. Have you been to the ABBA voyage?
Not yet. Not yet.
What?
Yes, I know.
Okay, that has to be correct. Okay, maybe we'll take you on a culture trip for our culture hour. Okay, we'll see if we can organise that. We'll take the Swedish ambassador to see ABBA for our culture hour. How about that?
I'd be delighted.
Okay, we will have a day. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.